Are you there? I hope you're there. If not, you're not hearing me speaking. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Dwight. This is the Wiseman Method Podcast. I want to ask you, are you there? If you're there, are your feelings there? And do you realize how different those two things are? You and your feelings. This is a fascinating look into the relationship that we have with our feelings today, as we're going to talk about several things, some of which tie into the situation we're in now with the COVID pandemic, and many of which transcend that to apply all different times. So mainly we're talking about the differentiation between our emotions and us as a person. We even get into a little bit of the discussion of what makes healthy or unhealthy repression of our feelings. So you're going to hear Claire Wiseman and David Livingston and I have a great conversation about this.
In the time of COVID.
Yeah, say that again.
Connectivity and sobriety in the time of COVID.
That sounds like a book title, so we better trademark that real quick.
I was thinking, why not?
Yeah. I truly hope this doesn't last long enough that we can write a book about it.
Exactly.
Or maybe we have to cash in quick. Let's start with that. Everybody is struggling with kind of finding different ways to try to be connected when we can't be connected. Right now, there's certain safety requirements, obviously, and we've gotten into some things on the show a little bit, talking about how do we find ways to connect when we can't otherwise connect with people. But especially for those that are out there that are trying to start into a new way of being sober and getting healthy, easy to fall back into the only thing that's working for me at the time, or the only thing that I know at the time, is a coping skill, which is addictive behavior. So how do we find ways to transcend that? What do we do to break that pattern when everything is kind of up in the air like it is?
I don't know if it's addictive behavior or just not knowing, not having learned yet how to deal with uncomfortable feelings, with negative feelings. I think it's different. And I think a lot of people do not seek help because they don't want to believe that they are falling to addictive behavior. They don't want to believe that they are failing, their treatment, the expectations. I think it's not always have to do with addiction. The lack of knowledge how to not be stuck in that, negative mode.
The thing about feelings is that you don't have to go looking for them; they'll find you. And right after sobriety, they often find people pretty strongly, or during times where there's less activity, and you're just kind of alone with yourself. There's less to distract you, or even be involved in, and so you may feel things more intensely. And if you're too isolated, or if you're alone a lot, one of the techniques that can really help with that is more of a meditative process, really to be able to sort of do more mindfulness processes that allow you to be with yourself in a way in which you do not get too identified with the feelings. So it's the identification with them that can drive you towards, doing things that aren't good for you. So if you can be with yourself, and there's a lot of mindfulness, books and things on tape, and, that you can get, apps you can get, and so forth, that really help with that. As a singular technique, when people are isolated, it's really helpful.
It might be interesting to say a little bit more about that, the problematic identification with our feelings. That's very intriguing. What would you say are some of the negative things about identification? What does that mean?
I think one of the mistakes that is often made is that, when people become sober, they already have intense feelings that are coming up, partly because whatever they were taking is no longer there, especially if it's an opioid. So that acts as a repression barrier. So that the opioids repress pain, but they repress all other feelings too. So you take that away and you have especially in the first week or two, you kind of have a flood of feelings as people physically feel better. What we see is, and what I see all the time is, okay, so physically you get better, and then all of a sudden you'll see an emotional process kick in, right? Because the system tends to, limit the amount of stimulation. So if physically people are better, then you'll see a next wave of more emotional processes happening. So as you get through that, then that tends to die down. But then you're left without the barrier of of an opiate, which is repressing it. So you then have to learn how to understand what you're feeling, navigate it. You have to learn how to identify with it. And you also have to learn how to forget about it. You have to learn how to not go into it. You have to be, people who are functioning at a high level repress their feelings a lot. The ability to repress what you're feeling is one of the significant parts of being healthy. So you could say that the way therapy works when it's working well is you go into the therapy session, and for that period of time, you deal with things more directly. You deal with your feelings. There's a way you can titrate them with the therapist. You get to understand them. You get to go through a process. And then you can walk out the door and you can shut them down. You can forget about them for a while and you get a break. As a process, there's a reverberation between opening things up and shutting them down. We have to be able to do both. So anyway, that's what I mean by it.
You're talking about repression in terms of the moderating effects on the healthy side. Over repression on the other side would be not dealing with things until I implode or explode or something. And you're talking about the other one, which is not over venting and allowing it to carry me away, sort of a thing.
That's it. So when someone walks in, and my job is to understand what it is that there's this time period where they get to open things up. And then my job is to help them titrate it, meaning they can internalize those feelings. They get some experience of being understood so that the feeling gets digested and starts to sort of get lowered, whatever tensions and needs there are around it, right? I'm lonely. Oh, okay. Well, tell me about it. So you get to go through that if that's the feeling. Or I'm angry. This person said that to me and what happened, right? So you go through it. And then you also get to sort of hopefully to some degree create some behaviors and some things they can do about it. So there's this process of opening things up, dealing with them, and then they can walk out of the office and feel like something's been done, right? A meal's been had. And they don't have to walk out hungry and feel like they've got to keep dealing with that. That's part of what a treatment really is. And then, if there's good support and they're talking to other people, that process is happening at some level. Or it can be. It can not always. Sometimes people are stirring things up in each other, which can have the opposite effect, which is, one of the dangers with treatments that are bigger, that have more variables in it. You don't necessarily know how a person's hearing the information that's coming out.
And one of the things that typically does happen is that rawness of emotion can bleed into other areas of life, which is why the therapeutic approach can help you to not only be more open in kind of a general way, but to filter and apply that openness. Any feeling can be discomforting if it's intense enough or unfamiliar enough. And if I haven't really been feeling anything very strongly, and all of a sudden sobriety starts to happen and I'm not self-medicating anymore, everything can feel very overwhelming.
More things like meditation and mindfulness processes that allow people to not repress feelings, but also not overly identify with them. To just see the nature of the mind-body process is this fluid state of things coming and going, in which you don't necessarily have to get identified with. It can be very helpful in slowing down any sense of compulsivity, because when you identify with something too strongly, it will push you and pull you in directions. And so the ability to be mindful and allow things to move in and out and see the nature of thoughts and feelings as just this changing, impermanent flow of, information, which is what it is, coming and going. It gives you a type of freedom, and you can sort of develop this observing ego in which you can kind of be with yourself in a way in which you're not necessarily so identified that you're caught up in it. The nature of all feelings is they will arise and they'll pass away. Okay. You don't even have to do anything about it. Sooner or later, they will all arise and pass away. The knowledge of that, the deep knowledge of that, is an immense help with cravings.
People are familiar with the idea of having like an inner child kind of a thing, or even an inner child relationship or monologue with the child that's inside of us, right? Not as many people talk about the sort of internal parent, that part of us that sort of sits in a calm, confident place inside ourselves that can say, it's going to be all right. In a way, the more true self, the more confident, authentic self inside of us that can say, we're going to make it through. I am not sad. I am feeling sad. The sadness is passing through. I am here and will be here when it's passed through as well. Sort of an idea that differentiates that out so that we are not every feeling we are having.
The ability to allow them to move in and out of us and feel like we don't have to hop on every train that comes by is an immense freedom and really useful when it comes to dealing with any sort of compulsivity. You don't develop that capacity instantly. It really takes a sustained effort.
I'm curious, where do you think that interacts with the idea of discomfort? Claire, you talk a lot about that, about being able to accommodate and accept discomfort in our lives. And that's a powerful part of recovery from dependence. Where do you think that fits together with being able to view these things as experiences we go through?
I think it's being able to really identify your feeling. I think once you really can identify, then you can work with it. I think a lot of people, they have this misconception that something is like permanently wrong with them, deep-rooted, and they are flawed. And I think that's where they get stuck. So it's truly understanding where the discomfort comes from, where the pain comes from. Once you do that, then you can see that path. But it's really having somebody help you recognize it and identify it. I think that's where David's job becomes so crucial for anybody to feel at least happy enough to live a healthy life. So I think that's what's missing for a lot of people. That's why when you said the addiction, I went there because I think is the tags, the labeling that keep people so stuck and so scared of being part of that stuck community. So I think that's another thing that we accomplished to do at Domus Retreat that is so different than any other treatment. Patients can go home and 2 months later, they start, falling back on that feeling of, being stuck, of not being able to handle life on life's terms and falling deeper and deeper. And they can call us and they can come for a week or 5 days and sit, with David, with the counselors, discuss it. We created a treatment center that is actually not for people that have relapsed or for people that want detox, but for anybody that is dealing with any of the branches of substance abuse, during, before, after, with zero judgment, with zero labeling, with no exact time, no exact plan. We are so different from each other. We're built different. Our histories are different. Our DNA is different. How we perceive life and pain is so different that there can't be exact forms of treatment or even diagnosis.
And I think that we struggle sometimes to think about it because we get used to thinking about things with big, huge words, like addiction is a big, huge emotional word that we have in our head. And we're used to dealing with it in some big, huge way that's supposed to solve the addiction problem for everyone or whatever. And it's interesting how there are certain things in our life that we don't do that about. we don't do that about saying, I'm having a hard time. Oh, well, you're having a hard time? Here's these 23 steps. You got to do all of those exactly right now and all this. And we do them in that order. Nope, sorry, you're doing them wrong. It's not going to work. Usually if someone we love says, I'm having a hard time, we say, tell me more. And we
Correct.
kind of tailor our response to that need at hand,
I think, sadly enough, in one way, these descriptions of what a group of people, had an agenda. If you create something that is chronic, that is, that there is no treatment, that there is no way out, that it becomes part of your personality, becomes part of who you are, and consequently never allows you to leave the treatment world. Mm-hmm. So, it puts you in that constant revolving door. So I think there are reasons why people use, terms, and why addiction, that really it's not that it doesn't have a heartbeat, doesn't have veins with blood running. It's really a condition that is very treatable.
I think
if
of it
wasn't made of this ugly, chronic, forever commitment, I think people would be willing to look for help. Once they get help, they probably would succeed a lot more in not relapsing.
You think people stay away from that identity sometimes, and they stay away from treatment? Because of that.
Correct, because they don't want to fall in that category of,
Yeah. I was just thinking about what kind of knowledge is empowering versus what kind is limiting. And for some reason, as you're saying that, I was thinking about, I'm a person who, if I go for a long walk or if I go for a jog, I have issues sometimes with my ankles, where my ankles will turn easily. So if I'm going to go on a hike or especially go for a run or something, I sit and I rotate my ankles a little bit, warm them up, and bend my knees a little bit. And if I do that, I rarely have a problem. And if I don't do that, I frequently have a problem, right, with that. And I was just thinking about that as you were saying, what if, I don't know, what if I had to go to certain types of shoe stores only, or what if I had to wear certain types of, weak ankle clothes, or give some kind of like expectation that I would tell everybody when I met them, I'm a weak ankler over here. That wouldn't be very empowering for me. That would be very limiting. I probably wouldn't go for a lot of walks or anything. But at the same time, if I just go, oh yeah, give me a minute, let me sit down and, mess around with my ankles for a minute and move forward with confidence, that's empowering. So, I guess it depends how we look at our own self-insight, and do we use it as a labeling way that's a burden, or does it help us know how to work with ourselves better?
I think in a way it causes, and David, you might think otherwise. I think in a way it causes an emptiness. It causes a disconnection from, from the human race. And I don't know. I think it's harmful. Not always, because nothing is always, but mostly.
Yeah, am I just a person with who thinks about his ankles differently than other people, or am I a whole nother species of person that doesn't belong walking with everyone else? Or if I am walking with everyone else, shouldn't I be so grateful that they would take me in and wait for me to rotate my ankles? I'm going to really use this metaphor, way overuse this metaphor until everyone's tired of it, I guess. But
there's a difference between discovering and listening. Like you said, well, so what's going on, or what do you need, or what's happening, right? So there's the listening process in the treatment is discovering what it is and who a person is. And it's an unbelievable gift to feel like somebody really hears us and understands us and knows in a way that feels right. That's maybe one of the most powerful and maybe the most important part of treatment. That we have to be taking something in from the outside into the inside that moves us, that helps us sort of broaden ourselves. And it's a hit or miss thing when you just have something built, right? It's like, oh, here's what we have to offer. And, parts of it might hit and parts of it might not, or maybe all of it doesn't feel right. Or maybe all of it does, but you can't, so really you're discovering. And I don't know, it's dangerous to go through a process of not discovering who the person is, what they're needing, where they're from, how they're developed, how they're organized, what their life is like on the outside, how they're organized inside. And as you can get a clearer and clearer picture of that, then you can just, you can tailor something that makes sense.
I kind of wanted to reflect back around to something you'd brought up, which is that mindfulness of being able to sit with ourselves, to differentiate in a healthy way, to basically to notice and observe ourselves where we're at, right? What kinds of things do you suggest to people? What kinds of things do you suggest to people to initiate that? You mentioned meditation. How do people go about that?
Okay, well, I guess the first thing I would say is I've talked to a number of people about doing it, and just about nobody ever does. So
that's the thing, right? About meditation, yeah.
Right. So because it's hard work, and to develop the ability to kind of have a strong enough level of concentration and a big enough observing ego that things are moving through us takes a lot of work to get there. And it's often more than people are wanting or willing to take on. And although there have been a few people who, have a history in yoga and other things like that, who it's not a big leap, but for other people, it doesn't necessarily correlate. But one of the reasons I'm bringing it up today is because with COVID going on and with people feeling more isolated, it is a potential way of being able to be with yourself in a way in which you can suffer less, and it works. It's a valid perspective in that regard, but it's different than most therapeutic treatments, which has to do with two people, right? It has to do with the ability to get a level of care and a type of understanding that comes from the outside in. Meditation is a one-person psychology, but right now with limits around, connectivity and support, it might make more sense. And certain people might be interested in trying it.
Do you find the most effective technique is just kind of that one-on-one dwelling on the thoughts or trying to empty the mind kind of approach?
My training in meditation comes from certainly a mindfulness approach, which really has to do with, I think primarily you could say this about yoga and meditations in general. So the fundamentals are you develop a high level of concentration. So what happens is whatever your object is, whether it's your breath or, that's a common one where you notice the breath coming in and out. So every time you get pulled away by thoughts, feelings, sounds, whatever it is, you come back. And through that process, over time, you develop concentration. You can then begin to notice everything that's coming and going inside you is separate than your awareness of it. Okay, that's one of the major insights that begins to give people some freedom, if you will. They don't have to hop on the train of that thought and that feeling, which is a big part of what happens with compulsivity and addiction. If they're just hopping on train to train, things can come and go. It reinforces the sense of the separateness of the awareness of the object, of the thoughts, the feelings, the sounds, whatever it is. The difference between the awareness of it and the object itself. In that differentiation, in that distance, there's a lot of freedom, and this can be developed, on your own. You don't have to meeting with other people right now.
One of the biggest things that I ever heard that was useful with meditation came from someone. It was basically just a meditation and yoga instructor type person who was at a conference where I was, and she'd work with tons of different people with this. And she said that all of the things that you usually find to be very, very helpful with meditation, like if you're thinking a certain way, if you're focused on a certain thing, or if you breathe a certain way, she said the best thing that she found was to be willing to tell people as soon as, like, if it doesn't work for them, to say, oh, well, let's mix that up. Like, in other words, if breathing deep is going to be aggravating for certain people. And so she would say, just breathe then. Don't breathe deep. Just try to pay more attention to how you normally breathe, and let's do something else to
yes.
draw your attention.
Right. That's right. That the idea isn't to complicate it. The idea is just to have something that you can rely on to bring your attention back to, because that develops the concentration. And once your mind is concentrated at a high enough level, things slow down. And as things slow down, you can begin to perceive things differently, and the insight can take hold, where you can differentiate between awareness and all of the objects, the thoughts, the feelings, the sounds, the taste, the body sensations, everything that's coming and going. And as you can differentiate between the awareness and all of those objects, there is an ability to a type of freedom that's a valid thing, and it can be developed by anybody through enough effort. You don't quiet your mind. It's concentration that quiets the mind. One of the reasons people fail at this is they keep sitting and thinking their mind should be quiet, and the mind quiets after spending enough time coming back, getting lost, coming back, getting lost, coming back. Eventually the mind will start to quiet on its own through the development of concentration. So when concentration's high, strong enough, all the other things start to take hold. But you have to be able to persist and develop the concentration. So that's the work of it. But the other thing that's important about this is that people who get better make a strong commitment. They make an intense commitment to something. And if you want to change your life, you can't be ambivalent. You have to be able to push through the ambivalence and make a commitment to something. If you want to develop anything in this world, that's how it goes. You have to be able to make a commitment.
The Wiseman Method podcast, as always, is produced by the Wiseman Method Rapid Detoxification Center. Learn more about our clinic and the work that we do at opiates.com. Live chat with us or call us on the phone. We'd love to talk to you. You can also interact with us on Twitter at Opiates. The music for this episode, as always, is the song Medical by the artist Clean Mind Sounds. This show is produced by Popped Collar Productions, a company helping you use podcasting to make your dreams come true. For Claire Wiseman and David Livingston, I've been Dwight Hurst. Thank you so much for listening today, and we will be back at you again soon with more answers to your questions about dependence, addiction, and recovery. Remember to keep asking questions, because if you find the right questions, you'll find the right answers. If you find answers, you will find hope. Bye-bye for now.